Daniel was kneeling on a leather ottoman that was pushed up against the end of his bed. He was bent over the end of the bed, with a pillow under his hips. A spanking cane, a paddle, and a wooden bath brush lay on the bed next to him. Daniel knew that in the bedroom next door his sister Anne was also bent over lying next to the same implements. Anne and Daniel were waiting for their aunt to come upstairs and punish them. They had both gotten into a lot of trouble earlier that day. Their aunt had told them that they were both going to be spanked, but she did not send them to their rooms for punishment then. They spent the rest of the day dreading their promised spanking. "Do you think that Aunt Angie will whip us?" Anne asked Daniel in a whisper. "I hate it when she whips me. I'd rather have twice the number of strokes with the cane." "Well, we're probably going to get the cane too," Daniel said glumly. Daniel knew that Anne had recently become more familiar with Aunt's riding whip than she might have wished. Anne was going through a rebellious phase. Most of that rebellion ended up being directed at Angie as their surrogate mother. In the last few months, it seemed that almost every week Anne pushed Angie too far, and Daniel heard Anne crying in the next room as Angie whipped her, bent over the end of the bed. As bedtime approached, they remained unpunished, silently hoping that Angie had somehow forgotten about the spanking they had coming, although such a miraculous event had never happened before. They were trying to study in the library when Angie come in and told them it was time for bed. As they left the room, she added, "Please get ready to take your spankings as well." The walk upstairs felt especially long as they thought about their upcoming punishment. Anne and Daniel took turns in their shared bathroom. Getting ready for a spanking meant laying out the cane, paddle, and bath brush, and getting into position over the end of the bed. The doors to their rooms was left open. Angie had not spanked Daniel and Anne in the same room since they were 10, but she insisted on leaving their bedroom doors open. Bent over the end of the bed, with his hips pushed up by the pillow, it was hard for Daniel to think about anything else but the spanking he had coming. Finally, he heard Angie's heels on the wooden stairs. Since Anne was younger and a girl, Angie always spanked her first. Listening while Angie spanked Anne, while he was bent over the end of the bed, awaiting his turn, seemed like getting 2 spankings. Daniel heard Angie go into Anne's room. "I'm sorry I was a bad girl, Angie. I'll never do it again." "Please don't spank me," Anne pleaded, although they both knew that once Angie had decided that a spanking was needed, nothing short of ironclad proof of innocence would sway her from administering punishment. "I know you're sorry, honey, but I also know that you need a good hard spanking," Angie told her. "Please don't whip me, Angie. I'll learn my lesson if you cane me, but please don't whip me." Daniel knew then that Angie must have been carrying the black riding whip, that she used to spank them when they were especially naughty. "No more of that, honey. It's time for you to take your spanking." In Daniel's mind's eye, he imagined that he saw Angie go over to the bed and exchange the whip she was carrying for the spanking cane. He imagined that she would be standing to Anne's left side as she lectured Anne in a calm tone reminding her of the reasons she was going to get a spanking, reminding her of what a bad girl she had been. Daniel heard the swish of the cane, followed by Anne's cry as Angie gave her the first stroke. His buttocks clenched unconsciously as he listened to Anne crying out after each stroke. After he had counted out 20 strokes, Angie ordered Anne to get up. Daniel started to feel a funny fire in his loins as he listened to Anne cry out again as Angie caned Anne. He counted out another 20 strokes. Anne was crying now. When her cries got louder, he knew that Angie was canning her across the tops of her thighs. He knew how much the cane burned across the tender skin of the thighs. There was a break as Angie let Anne rest, Angie's calm voice lecturing again, Anne's voice answering, promising to be a good girl. Soon, Anne was crying again as Angie continued canning her. Daniel knew that the second part of the canning would mirror the first. The strokes would first be across the bottom, then the thighs. Anne was sobbing by the time Angie administered another 20 strokes across her bottom and 10 across her thighs. Angie gave Anne another break. Daniel imagined Angie stroking Anne's hair and her back. Anne's face streaked with tears as Angie told her that she loved her and that Anne needed this spanking. After a few minutes, when Anne had stopped crying, he heard Anne's voice, loud and pleading. "Please, Angie, don't whip me. I'll be a good girl. Please don't whip me." Daniel imagined Angie standing to Anne's left side, holding the riding whip. As Anne begged Angie not to whip her, her buttocks would be clenching as she squirmed and pushing into the mattress, as if somehow she could burrow into it and escape the lash of the whip. He heard Angie's voice, also louder. "Get that bottom up, young lady, or I'll have to give you extras." Anne would be resigned now, knowing that no amount of pleading would allow her to escape her whipping. He heard the smack of the braided leather across Anne's bottom, followed by her cries, which turned to sobs as the whipping continued. Like the canning, he knew that Angie would give the whipping first across her buttocks and then across the thighs. Daniel heard Angie's voice, soft, almost crooning to Anne. Angie always held them, comforting them after the pain of the whipping. After about 5 minutes, her voice sharper, and he heard Angie say, "Over my knee, honey," as Anne lay like a naughty little girl over Angie's lap. Angie reminded her again of why she was being punished. Angie then told her that she would get 20 strokes on each buttock with the paddle, and then 20 on each buttock with the bath brush. As she would with a little girl, Angie would pin Anne's right arm behind her, holding her firmly so she could not squirm out of the way as Angie paddled her. The paddling had a 1-2 beat as Angie spanked first one buttock, then the other. Anne was soon crying again. Angie let Anne catch her breath, comforting her again. When the paddling started again, the smacks had more of a thud. Daniel knew that Anne was being spanked with the bath brush, and that this was the last part of Anne's spanking. This was the part of Angie's spankings that hurt the most. Where Anne might have struggled as she was spanked with the paddle, Daniel imaged that Anne lay limply over Angie's lap, resigned to her punishment, sobbing and crying out with each stroke. When the paddling was over, Angie held Anne, crooning, telling her she was a good girl for talking a much-needed spanking. Finally, Anne stopped crying. Angie made her bend over the bed again, as she had for her canning and whipping. She would have to remain in this position while she listened to Daniel get his spanking. Then Daniel heard Angie's heels on the hard wood of the hallway, coming toward his room. When she came into the room, the first thing he noticed was the black riding whip in her right hand.